All right. Good evening and welcome to the public presentation of the 7th Street Streetscape project. I am your host this evening, Rich Anthony. I'm the principal project engineer for the City of Covington, Department of Public Works. With me this evening via Zoom meeting are Carolyn Bowman of City Administration, Chris Clemens of WSP, the design consultant, Rob Hantz, also of WSP, Aaron Detchen, also of WSP, Gary Woltmazek of Human Nature, the landscape architect, and Mark Brueggemann of CT Consultants. We will be presenting to you the preliminary plans for the reconstruction of the public space along 7th Street from Washington Street to GREENUP Street. Following the presentation, we will be answering questions submitted either by Zoom chat box or via Google form. At this point, I will turn the presentation over to Chris Clemens of WSP. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the public information for the 7th Street Streetscape project. Rich, can you confirm that the slideshow is up on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Perfect, thanks. All right, first we'll cover some ground rules for the presentation tonight. The meeting agenda, what we are going to do at the beginning is presentation of the project materials, and then we will roll right into a question and answer session and a general discussion session. Some guidelines for the people on the Zoom meeting. All participants will be muted during the presentation. Questions can be typed into the dialog box for presenters to view, and then participants can also raise their hand using the icon if they would like to speak once we get into the question and answer session. We ask that everybody hold their questions till the end with raising their hand. Everybody will get a chance to speak if they would like to via the raise hand. The functions that you can do if you're not accustomed to the Zoom meeting is right here in the participant dialog box. You can raise your hand and we will see that on our end, and we will be able to unmute you so that you can ask your question. Or if you don't want to speak up during the meeting, you can also utilize the chat dialog box and type your message in here. Those messages can be typed in at any time during the presentation, and at the end of the meeting, we will start with those first. Another note to point out to everybody is that this presentation is being recorded and it will be available on the city's website after the meeting. Starting off with the purpose and need for the project, what we're looking at doing is enhancing the sidewalks and streets along the 7th Street corridor, increasing safety, improving walkability, improving aesthetics, and while we're trying to attract prospective businesses and talent. This is along the lines of what the city has been planning with their streetscape projects throughout the city. The proposed project components that you will see are relocating the overhead utilities to below grade, reconstructing sidewalks, resurfacing the roadway pavement, installing mast arm signal poles instead of the span wire traffic signal poles, installing decorative street lights, installing trees, plantings, and some street furniture, and also reconfiguring the parking area in the block between Washington Street and Madison Avenue. A little bit of the project timeline. We got started designing the project in the spring of 2020 and have moved along with preliminary design, which has got us to this part in the fall of 2020, where we're conducting the public information meeting, basically give you guys an understanding of where we're at with the design and show you guys the proposed features. After the meeting, we'll continue on into final design, hoping to wrap up the completion of final design in the winter of 2020 or 2021. With that being said, we'd like to begin construction, a target date for the summer of 2021, with a target end construction date in the fall of 2022. I'd like to note that these 3 timeframes at the bottom are target dates. That's what we are shooting for at the moment. So that's what the project schedule looks like. An overall picture of the entire corridor. It's basically along the 7th Street corridor from Washington Street, headed east across Madison, and then across Scott Boulevard to the eastern terminus there at GREENUP Street. To give you a feel for the features that we are proposing here, we are showing a typical section. This is along the west end of the project between Washington Street and GREENUP Street. Basically, we will be reconstructing sidewalks, curbs, street surf, redoing the street pavement from building face to building face, which is also the existing right-of-way along here. We're on the west end providing 2 11-foot lanes, angled parking on the south side, and then parallel parking that's temporary loading zone on the north side. We are widening the sidewalks on both sides. On the north side, we're proposing approximately 24-foot sidewalk width. And on the south side, we're proposing approximately 28-foot sidewalk width. As you can see, we're looking at planting curbs, planting the trees, and putting some street furniture out to make it pedestrian friendly. As we move along the corridor towards the east, you can see that we have narrowed down to a 16-foot travel lane, one travel lane with 8-foot width on-street parking on both sides. As we continue to the east, the sidewalks will stay relatively the same to what they are now, which varies about 8 to 9 feet width on both sides, the north side and the south side. We are also proposing decorative light poles along the corridor. Looking at a blow-up picture of the block between Washington and Madison, you can tell what we're doing is repaving the asphalt surface for a smoother ride. We have implemented some traffic control coming across Washington Street so that we are striping out for a left turn lane and then a through turn lane in a right through and a right turn lane. We have on the west side of this block, we are proposing angled parking on both the north side and the south side with a mid-block crossing where we've introduced a curb extension to make it safer for the public to cross. And as we head over towards Madison Avenue, we break into 2 lanes, one a straight through and a left turn, and then a right turn to head south onto Madison Avenue. At both intersections, Washington Street and Madison Avenue, we are proposing mast arm signal poles to replace the existing span wire traffic signal poles. Here is a bird's eye 3D perspective looking back from Madison Avenue towards the west along this block. As you can see, we have trees along both sides of the sidewalk. We have the mast arm signal poles there at the intersection with Madison Avenue. We have hardscaping along the sidewalks, and we've provided for a much larger sidewalk area that will be more pedestrian friendly in this area. As we move across from Madison Avenue to Scott Street, we're keeping that same concept by redoing the asphalt concrete through here, repaving, redoing the sidewalks. One thing to note is in front of Hotel Covington They have relatively new sidewalk in this area, and we are going to salvage that the best we can and tie into it with the roadway. As you head to Scott Boulevard, we are replacing the existing span wire traffic signal poles with mast arm signal poles while reconstructing driveways. Moving on to the east towards the eastern terminus of the project, we move across Scott Boulevard and continue down to GREENUP Street where we end the project limits. In this area, again, we're relocating the utilities to below ground, installing decorative street lights, installing the mast arm signal poles. We are also providing curb bump outs at both the Scott Boulevard intersection and the GREENUP Street intersection. Here on the screen, you can see what the proposed roadway and sidewalk configuration is going to look like in the future. This is at Scott Street looking east towards GREENUP. As you can tell right here, this is at the intersection where we have curb extensions. On this curb extension, you see that it is all hardscaping. And then on the other curb extension down here, we have an option that we can put plantings in, some softscaping in here to break up the hardscaping. Another 3D perspective that we're showing, this is at GREENUP Street looking towards the west, back along 7th Street. As you can tell, we are proposing the curb extensions at this intersection as well. This allows for a safer crossing for the pedestrians. Going back, what we'd like to talk about now is the 7th Street parking concept that we have come up with. A big portion of this design is reconfiguring the block between Washington Street and Madison Avenue to make it more pedestrian friendly and more outdoor dining options while also providing ample parking. Gary, if you'd like to discuss some details here, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I think you can see in blue underneath is the existing curb configuration. And if you're familiar out there, there's this little narrow island that has some lights in it. And so you're separate from your traffic lane. And then you had the parking. So we've done away with that island, and we've saved probably the width of a travel lane and dedicated that to pedestrian sidewalk. So on the south side, we're almost doubling the width of the usable sidewalk by doing that. The north side, given the alignment, we are able to add angled parking. That curb line is pretty close to existing, and on the east side of that block, we've been able to make it a little bit wider. What you're seeing here is much more efficient layout of the travel and parking for a net gain of 11 spaces. So we've added spaces, we've increased the pedestrian use, the outdoor dining opportunities. On the south side of the block, both east and west, there's art installations, there's the red bike station and planting and some trees in. Those are going to be preserved and enhanced. So in some cases, we're going to enlarge the planting areas, and we're going to incorporate curbs around, I think there's a transformer and thing that's almost out in the pavement. So we're really cleaning up that edge and clearly defining pedestrian and vehicular use zones. So that's probably it on this slide.
And this gives you a blow up 3D perspective of what the proposed concept will look like in this block. This is over on the west end of the block, where you can see we have the angled parking on both sides of the street. This is,
Chris,
yes,
while you have this view up, can you share with everyone to explain the difference on how we're handling the paver band on 7th Street versus the traditional paver band that we're using on Madison, just because the two will be slightly different? I want to make sure we discuss that.
absolutely. I'll go ahead and mention that right now, Mark. So as Mark kind of alluded to, the city standard for their streetscape projects is to provide a paver band right behind the curb and adjacent to the sidewalk. If you're familiar with it, to the north of, actually along Madison Avenue here, you can see the paver band out there now. What we've done on 7th Street, instead of providing that paver band, we are going to provide a concrete scoring pattern to give it a little aesthetic appeal instead of putting the paver band down through 7th Street.
And Chris, you might add, some of the reason for that is as you get to the east of Madison, the sidewalks are more narrow than the existing sidewalks on Madison. And so if you put that typical paver band in that area, the look would not be the same as the standard look on other streets. So that's why we've gone with this different aesthetic treatment through this whole corridor.
That is correct. Good point, Rob.
And if I could add, with this view in that mid-block crossing, the size of that bump out, and it's really bringing pedestrians out. With the amount of outdoor dining and activity on both sides of this street, this mid-block crossing is really going to improve circulation in a very safe way. So I think this is a good view to realize that.
And one last thing to mention, and Gary mentioned it, about the south side of 7th Street, the proposed width to be in the 28-foot width range. The current sidewalk is, I believe, 12 feet in width. So we're expanding it by approximately 14 feet. So that'll give a lot more pedestrian abilities and use for that sidewalk area.
Chris, one other thing, if you could just also, we recognize that there's a number of businesses in this area, this specific area, and we recognize the need to have a loading zone. So could you address for everyone how we've handled the loading zone?
Correct. Yes, I will, Mark. That's where I was going next. So as we get towards the eastern end of the block, more towards the Madison Avenue intersection, what we have done is maintained the temporary loading zones and parking zones with parallel parking throughout. This is going to be the eastern portion of the block. So basically, designated times, this will be the loading zones, which is how it currently is right now as well. Moving on, we will discuss a little bit of the streetscape features that we are proposing along the entire corridor. The first one that I'd like to discuss is the picture on the left. As we stated earlier, we are proposing the curb extensions to make it safer for pedestrians to cross the street and everything. We have one of them that is basically hardscaped with street furnishings. That's the one on the left. And then to make a little softer feel and to have some plantings in, we've come up with a alternative design, which is on the right. This is the curb extensions with the plantings. that we've proposed a couple of these throughout the corridor as well. Gary, do you have any additional insight on these curb extensions?
I think what we've shown on the recommended plan is that when we've done a curb extension where we feel like that could be more usable for pedestrians to gather, we proposed pave. And then areas where we have the curb extension and maybe it's not as intently used area, then we're suggesting the plan. So that's how we've kind of decided and what we've shown as a preliminary recommendation on the plan.
That is correct. Additional streetscape.
And the planters will,
Go ahead, Gary.
well, I was just going to talk about the planters and you can go to the next
Okay.
slide because they're represented there. But the site furnish palette will be the same as Madison. So we'll have benches. They're very similar to North Madison in the previous phases. They're very high quality steel product line that has a good coating with a good lifespan on the coating. The bike rack is the same that you'll see on North Madison, and the street lights are the same as North Madison and on the Madison, South Madison phase of this project. So trash receptacles are the same and the containers are the same on both projects.
Correct. And what I'd like to point out on the bike rack that we are showing here, this is more applicable to the Madison Avenue because we're not going to have that paver band that you see there. That will be a scored concrete pattern. And I'd also like to make note that all of these streetscape features that we are proposing through the corridor are all city standards that they have adopted and using throughout all of their streetscape projects throughout the city. Moving on, I'd like to talk about the public comments forms and where you can find those. They are posted on the city website with the link right here to the city website. On the city website, there's also a Google form that you can click the link and it will take you straight to a browser where you can type in your comments. Also, these comment forms have been delivered to the property owners and tenants along the corridor. You can also there's also going to be copies at the city building in case you needed to stop in and grab one and fill out a hard copy. And of course, you can also email any of the comments to the project team. Over on the right, this is the public comments form that everybody along the corridor should have received. It has my information on it where you can email me any comments that you have for the project. I'd like to make note that the deadline for submitting comments is Friday, November 27th. So please get your comments into us by then so that the project team can take a look at them and see what everybody's thinking. With that said, that concludes our presentation of the project materials. What we would like to do now is go into a question and answer session and in any general discussion, that general discussion session that we need to have. What we are going to look at is if anybody has provided any comments in the chat box, which I'm looking at that right now and I do not see any yet. Now's the time to either raise your hand via the participants raise hand dialog box, or in the Zoom group chat, you can go ahead and type in your questions or any discussions that you'd like to have there.
Chris, while we're waiting for possible questions or comments, could you zoom in on your email address on the comments form, just so anyone that would want to jot that down?
Yes, that's what I'm doing right now.
I figured it was.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you see that, Rob?
Yes.
And for those viewing the Zoom meeting, obviously you can send the comments to myself, email address down at the bottom. You can also write down the Google form link that you can type in your browser, and that will take you straight to the public comments form as well online.
We have received a couple questions or comments now. I'll go ahead and read the first one. The question is, I do have a question regarding the uneven pavement between Pike and 7th going around the Perk Coffee Shop. Will that be addressed?
Is that talking about the roadway pavement, I assume? So since we are not reconstructing the pavement as a whole, we are resurfacing. For the most part, the roadway surface will stay relatively the same how it is now. We are just going to do a mill and overlay and make the roadway surface smoother and extend its useful life.
Okay,
with
and
the new
so
surface coat.
clarification for that, they were asking about the sidewalk.
Okay, gotcha.
Chris, could you call up one of the exhibits that
Yep.
that particular area that might help the discussion?
Yep, let me get back over to that. Let's see. Okay, so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is that coffee shop right here.
That's correct.
Yep.
That's
So
correct.
yes, we will be reconstructing the sidewalk all in this area. Now, we're not extending the project limits over towards Pike Street, but we are basically at the building face, we'll be redoing the sidewalks there all the way to the curb line.
Right. And with this layout, it should be noted that we are adding additional parking spaces in this area that are immediately in the vicinity of the parking shop or the coffee shop, excuse me.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, and that was the second question is,
Yeah, so
or no,
the-
well,
So we've got another follow-up to that question, and I will go ahead and read that first, and then we do have a different question. The statement is, but the corner is about 5 to 6 inches difference in elevation from one corner to the other. And I think as long as it's within the project limits of where this project will be occurring, any differential aspects of the sidewalk, those will be addressed. So the ultimate end project will have a safe, smooth sidewalk transition, I think would be the way to address this. Now, if it's outside of these project limits, it may not be addressed with this.
that is correct.
Okay, so the next question is, will we be losing parking spaces on 7th Street near GREENUP due to the bump outs?
I don't think so.
Go ahead. Is that Rich? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we looked at that when we were walking out there doing the line and grade inspection. I believe we are not losing any parking spaces in that area.
And I believe that is correct as well, Rich.
Yeah, because of the stop bar location and the distance you have to stay back from the stop bar.
Currently, that is all the questions we have received. And I'm not seeing anyone requesting to speak by raising their hand yet. So we'll give it a few minutes more.
Yeah, let's call it, let's give it another 5 minutes. If nothing comes up in the next 5 minutes, then we'll terminate the presentation.
So we did just receive another question. This one is, I do know that the street area down by Hotel Covington next to the garage is in an alleyway. Many vendors need to back into that alley, and the 2 or 3 parking spaces across from the alley become a burden on drivers. Can that be looked at or investigated?
Okay, I went to the blow up plan here, and I'm just reading the question again and wrapping my head around it.
I believe that alleyway is right where your cursor is, that alleyway right
Yeah,
there.
that's the alleyway. And imagine what they're looking at are those, where you see those 2 blue cars down there.
Yeah, right
don't know-
across on the south side.
Yeah, I don't know that we can eliminate parking spaces through there. That would be very difficult to do.
And the intent was to put back the same amount of parking spots that are currently out there as it's feasible.
Yeah. That would be a question for somebody other than us. That's outside the scope of what we're doing. But I will make a note of that question.
Okay, so yeah, I think what they're asking for is the vendors back in this away to the alley, and concerned with these vehicles right here on the south side.
Yep. I mean, if we were adding parking spaces rather than taking them away, it'd be a different question. Like I say, I'll ask.
I mean, that's a tough one. It's just that parking's at a premium at that location.
Yeah, everywhere along there between.
We do have the garage, but I think we can look at it. Maybe there's something we can do.
Okay, so an add-on or an additional question, comment is the alley is too tight and the drivers then block the entrance to the garage. And a follow-up statement is it's an accident waiting to happen.
Yes, but it's an accident on private property.
I think it's a good point, and I think we can at least take a hard look at it and see if there is anything we can do. It's actually a really good point. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do anything about it, but let's at least investigate it and see if maybe we can come up with something.
Okay, like I say, I've made a note of it.
Great.
And I'll bring it up as soon as I can get with Chris.
Okay, yes, good discussion there and comments.
So currently, no additional questions, comments, or any requests to speak.
Okay, we'll give it 1 more minute.
There's another question.
Yes.
Can this slideshow be made viewable later? And the answer is yes. The slideshow will be posted on the city's website, which can be found via going to the regular City of Covington website and going to, I believe it is Services, Public Works, and there is a link to both the 7th Street Streetscape project and the Madison Avenue Streetscape project there, which is where you will be able to view all of these documents.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I want to thank everybody. Very good presentation. To those people, citizens who are on Zoom with us, very good questions. Thank you. We've got some homework we need to get done over the next couple of weeks. And if that's it, then I am going to say let's terminate this presentation. Everyone have a good night.